Hello everyone, today let's learn the anatomy of humerus or the upper arm bone. Humerus is a typical long bone that extends from the shoulder to the elbow. It is present in the arm or brachium. It is the longest and largest bone of the upper extremity. Superiorly, it articulates with the glenoid cavity to form glenohumeral joint, and inferiorly, it articulates with the radius and ulna to form the elbow joint. Now let's see the site determination and anatomical position of humerus. Humerus presents a few clear identification features that help us to determine the site. Let's see what are those features. In its upper end, it has a round head which is facing medially, slightly backwards and upwards. This head of humerus articulates with the glenoid cavity of scapula. In the anterior aspect, the upper end has a lesser tubercle, greater tubercle and an intertubercular sulcus. And coming to the lower end, it is flattened from before backwards, and posteriorly it has an olecranon fossa. So the end which is having the head of humerus is placed upwards, and the flattened lower end is placed downwards, and head should be faced medially, backwards and slightly upwards, and the upper end with the lesser tubercle, greater tubercle and the intertubercular sulcus should be faced anteriorly, and the end with the surface with olecranon fossa is placed posteriorly, and that's how it is determined, and it's placed in anatomical position. Now let's see the gross features and attachments of humerus. Humerus has two ends, an upper end, a lower end and an intervening shaft. Let's see the upper end. Upper end has the head, three necks and two tubercles, a lesser tubercle and a greater tubercle, and an intertubercular sulcus. First of all, let's see the head. Head is rounded and large. It forms 1/3 of a spear. It is large as compared to the glenoid cavity. It articulates with the glenoid cavity to form the glenohumeral joint. Coming to the neck, humerus has three necks. The anatomical neck, which is at the constriction of the head. The margins of the head forms the anatomical neck, whereas the surgical neck is present below the lesser and greater tubercles at the constriction of shaft over here. And a morphological neck, it is the junction of the metaphysis and diaphysis. It is the true junction of the head and shaft. Coming to the anatomical neck, it gives attachment to the articular capsule of shoulder joint. Superiorly, it is deficient to allow the tendon of long head of biceps brachii, and medially it extends downward onto the shaft for about 1 to 2 centimeters. Coming to the surgical neck, it is very important feature of the proximal end or the upper end. It is the common site for fracture, one of the place for humeral fracture, and it is related to axillary nerve and anterior and posterior circumflex humeral vessels. So whenever fracture is happen, axillary nerve is damaged, and there may be damage to anterior and posterior circumflex vessels. And it has tubercles, a lesser tubercle and a greater tubercle. Coming to the greater tubercle, it is present anterolaterally. This is greater tubercle. On its posterior superior aspect, it has three impressions: upper impression, a middle impression and a lower impression. The upper impression gives insertion to supraspinatus muscle, and middle impression to infraspinatus muscle, and the third one, the lower impression, gives insertion to teres minor muscle. The mnemonic is SIT, SIT. And coming to lesser tubercle, it has an impression for the insertion of subscapularis muscle. It's subscapularis muscle. It's a multipennate muscle. It gets inserted into the lesser tubercle, and the four muscles, the supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor and subscapularis muscle, four together forms the rotator cuff muscles or musculotendinous cuff. Coming to the intertubercular sulcus, it is also called the bicipital groove. A transtubercular ligament forms a passage. The bicipital groove contains the tendon of long head of biceps brachii along with its synovial sheath surrounding it, and the ascending branch of anterior circumflex humeral vessel artery. And the bicipital groove has two lips, the outer lateral lip and an inner medial lip and a floor. The outer lateral lip gives insertion to the pectoralis major, and the inner lip gives insertion to teres major, and the floor gives insertion to latissimus dorsi. The mnemonic is lady between two majors. The lady, L, refers to the latissimus dorsi, and the major, pectoralis major, on the lateral lip, and medial lip, it gives insertion to the teres major. That's all about the upper end. Let's discuss about the intervening shaft of humerus. The intervening shaft is circular in cross section in the upper half and triangular in cross section in the lower half. It has three borders: the anterior border, the medial border, and the lateral border, and three surfaces: the anterolateral surface, the anteromedial surface, and a posterior surface. Coming to the anterior border, it is an extension of the lateral lip of bicipital groove and extends up to the radial fossa. In the upper half, it is distinct, it is well defined up to the anterior margin of deltoid tuberosity, whereas in the lower half, it is indistinct. Coming to the medial border, it is an extension of medial lip of bicipital groove and extends up to the medial epicondyle. This border in its middle has a rough impression that gives insertion to the coracobrachialis, and on the lower part it is sharp to form the medial supracondylar ridge. The medial supracondylar ridge gives origin to humeral head of pronator teres near the medial epicondyle. And coming to the lateral border extends from the posterior part of greater tubercle up to the lateral epicondyle. Near the posterior part of greater tubercle, it is distinct, and in the middle it is untraceable, and in the lower part again it becomes sharp to form the lateral supracondylar ridge. In the upper two-third of the lateral supracondylar ridge, brachioradialis takes its origin, and in the lower one-third it gives origin to extensor carpi radialis longus. The lateral border is interrupted by the radial or spiral groove in the middle. Coming to the the surfaces, the anterolateral surface, which is present between the anterior border and the lateral border, has a V-shaped deltoid tuberosity in the middle. It gives insertion to the deltoides muscle. And coming to the anteromedial surface, it is present between the anterior border and the medial border, and in the upper half it forms the floor of bicipital groove, and in the middle it has a nutrient foramen which passes the nutrient artery. The nutrient artery of humerus is a branch of the brachial artery. And coming to the posterior surface, the posterior surface has a radial or spiral groove in the middle. Here you can see the radial sulcus. It is the radial groove which lodges the radial nerve and profunda brachii vessels. And above the radial groove, there is a crest for triceps brachii, which gives origin to the lateral head of triceps brachii. And in the lower part, from spiral groove to the lower end, the entire extent gives origin to the medial head of the triceps brachii. And the brachialis origin, it is very vast. The brachialis takes origin from the lower part of the anteromedial surface, and the lower part of anterolateral surface, and partly the posterior surface. If you see here, it takes origin from here, and then the anterolateral surface, and partly it goes to the back. That is brachialis origin. And coming to the lower end of humerus, the lower end of humerus has articular part, the capitulum and trochlea. The capitulum is a rounded projection which articulates with the head of humerus, whereas the trochlea is a pulley-shaped projection that articulates with trochlear notch of ulna. The trochlea has two phalanges, the medial phalange and the lateral phalange, and it has non-articular part. The non-articular part includes the medial epicondyle, the lateral epicondyle, and the radial fossa, the coronoid fossa, and a olecranon fossa posteriorly. The olecranon fossa lodges the olecranon process of ulna in a fully extended elbow, whereas the radial fossa lodges the head of radius, and coronoid fossa lodges the coronoid process of ulna in a fully flexed elbow. Coming to the medial epicondyle, in anteriorly it gives common flexor origin, the origin for superficial group of flexor muscles, and in the anterior part of lateral epicondyle there is a common extensor origin, and posteriorly the lateral epicondyle gives origin to the anconeus. That's all about the gross features and attachments. Now let's see the ossification of humerus. Humerus ossifies with the help of 8 centers, one primary center for the shaft, and 7 secondary centers, 3 for the upper end and 4 for the lower end, 1 for the head of humerus, 1 for the greater tubercle, 1 for the lesser tubercle, and here 1 at the lateral epicondyle, 1 for the capitulum, 1 for the medial epicondyle and trochlea. The 3 secondary centers of upper end fuses together to form the conjoint epiphysis, and in the lower end The three of a lateral epicondyle, capitulum and trochlea fuses to form conjoined epiphyses, whereas the medial epicondyle fuses separately. These epiphyses fuses with the shaft, conjoined epiphyses, and these three fuses, medial epicondyle separately fuses. Sometimes the medial epicondyle will not fuse with the shaft, and it may be mistaken as the medial epicondyle fracture. That's all about ossification, and let's see some clinical correlations. Axillary nerve, radial nerve, and ulnar nerve. These three nerves are directly related to parts of humerus. Axillary nerve is related to the surgical neck, and radial nerve is related to the radial groove, and the ulnar nerve is related to the posterior part of medial epicondyle. Fracture at these regions may result damage to these nerves. There are three common sites of fracture in humerus: at the surgical neck and shaft and supracondylar region. This is a fracture at surgical neck, which may lead to damage of axillary nerve, and this is a fracture at the shaft, which leads to damage at radial nerve, and this is the fracture of supracondylar fracture. In this fracture, there is dislocation of the lower part of humerus towards backside, which may be mistaken as the elbow dislocation. The one point you have to remember for to know the elbow dislocation: in a normal person, in a flexed elbow, the medial epicondyle, lateral epicondyle, and the olecranon fossa together forms an equilateral triangle. In the case of elbow dislocation, the lower end of humerus will be separated from the radius and ulna, so this ratio, this equilateral triangle will be lost. So with this help of triangle, we can differentiate the supracondylar fracture from the elbow dislocation, because in supracondylar fracture, the lower part along with the olecranon process is dislocated backwards, so the triangle is not lost. And one more thing to remember for the supracondylar fracture, it is median nerve and brachial artery which damages in this fracture. Remember the median nerve and the brachial artery. Due to damage of brachial artery, a condition called Volkmann's ischemic contracture is resulted, which leads to shortening of the forearm muscles, which leads to these conditions: elbow flexion, forearm pronation, wrist flexion, thumb adduction, metacarpophalangeal extension, and interphalangeal joint flexion. These are condition in the Volkmann ischemic contracture. And next there will be myositis ossificans, in which the bony mass is formed in the muscles. This will be result of damage, occlusion of the brachial artery in supracondylar fracture. Thank you.